especially play up the really strange views held by these differing systems of thought so as to keep the audience's attention on those strange, unrelated views. Red herring. So it's a red herring, folks. It's a red herring for you to understand what Manichaean cosmogony was all about, so you have an understanding of what the light principle is and the father of goodness in the light principle. And we haven't even gotten into this. I've just been giving you bits and pieces of it. We're going to get much more into it. And the three moments of creation and the different Jesuses, that's all red herrings. Because what you should do is you should ignore all that background stuff. And you should just be focused upon the fact that you're a Manichaean. Don't want to know what a Manichaean actually was. I was stunned. I can't believe that you're doing this. Do you have any idea, once we lay all this out, how bad you all are going to look? This is going to be coronavirus, COVID-19, and the collapse of Soteriology 1.1, the big issues in 2020. Because are you going to go down swinging? Or are you willing to go, I've never even read Clement. Sorry. Yeah. You sound like you're going down swinging. You don't see how it's relevant? That in one system, you don't even have a God that can create? And yet you're going to insist that that's the system that gives us our understanding of the decrees when we say God's the creator of all things, including time itself? And you're going to go, red herring, red herring. Okay, Leighton, did you take a class on logic? Because you're using red herring, straw man, ad hominem, chest thumping. You're using all these argument stuff. What classes did you take on that? I'm just going to start asking, because right now you're giving me a lot of reason to go, it sounds like you're just going with whatever people tell you that fits your system. You're not doing any checking of your sources here. Number 2, focus on all the ways Stoics, Gnostics, and Manichaeans are different from each other instead of addressing their commonality as it relates to claims made by a former Manichaean named Augustine, who had a great influence on the church's theological development, i.e. his introduction of deterministic philosophy and a denial of LFW, red herring. That's a repetition of what was just mentioned before, already been refuted. Number 3, focus on Dr. Wilson's simplified generalizations and summaries in an interview and booklet geared for laymen while ignoring actual scholarly citations from his Oxford thesis. We haven't gotten to it yet. We have established a logical reason to provide all the background, and you're scared to death that once we do that, we're going to rip it to shreds, and we will. But we're going to do it very carefully because you've challenged me to do it, and we're going to do it. I just read you what he said on Clement, which isn't what you said about Clement. At least he didn't quote the wrong stuff from Clement. I will give him that one. Red herring. No, straw man. Wait a minute, I didn't get there. Then overstate Wilson's generalized summaries to draw absurd conclusions clearly not meant by Wilson. Wanted to get to this. Okay, so what we're being told, I've read you very plainly the conclusion, haven't I not? Almost every program. Here it is again. The Reformed theologian Benjamin Warfield commented the Reformation, inwardly considered, was just the ultimate triumph of Augustine's doctrine of grace over Augustine's doctrine of the church. Warfield's statement is pinpoint accurate, but unfortunately, due to Luther's and Calvin's reliance upon Augustine, the unmerited grace of the Christian God did not triumph. In Augustinian Calvinism, Reformed theology, it was the radicalized grace of the Manichaean God that triumphed. Augustine was the father of tulip, total depravity, total inability to respond to God, unconditional election, Stoic, Gnostic, Manichaean duped. That's his divine unconditional predestination of individual destinies. Limited atonement, Christ only died for the elect. Irresistible grace, violent Manichaean grace. Now just stop, just really quickly, think about it. Think of the logical chasm that exists. between the Manichaean religion, which thinks that the historical Jesus was a fraud and has other cosmic Jesuses that are a different Jesus, and the idea of irresistible grace and regeneration, and then, of course, the idea of limited atonement. If you can even start to connect those things, you're trying to find something that doesn't exist. That's exactly what's going on here. Irresistible grace, violent Manichaean grace. Grace in Manichaeism is pooping out light. You just don't like me pointing that out. But that's what it is. It's pooping out light. So that the little sparks from the veggies you eat can go up and become part of the Milky Way and go to the moon, into the sun, and then into the realm of light. That's grace. If you think that's what we're talking about, that explains why you've been missing stuff so long. I continue. And the gift of perseverance invented by Augustine to explain the extreme differences in how persons live their lives following salvific infant baptism. Therefore, modern Calvinism in these deterministic distinctives has more in common. Listen to this. I didn't write this. This is Dr. Wilson. Therefore, modern Calvinism in these deterministic distinctives has more in common with ancient philosophies and religious heresies than with early Christianity, and objective evaluations of the facts cannot avoid this startling conclusion. Because current Calvinistic deterministic interpretations of scripture passages are interpretations brought into Christianity through Augustine's Manichaean past. So when you all listen to the hours of exegesis of John 6, Romans 8, Ephesians 1, you didn't know that this was actually Manichaeanism brought in by Augustine. There I stood for 20 minutes in Dallas with nothing but a Greek New Testament in my hand, making my opening statement. And it was all because of Manny. You didn't know that, did you? Yeah. I just have to interpret it. I know I was reading the Greek. I know that it was straight out of the Greek text, but no. The Greek text had nothing to do with it. I was just giving you whatever Augustine told me to believe. Excuse me, but I have no respect for that level of absurdity. And no one should. No one should. Brought into Christianity through Augustine's Manichaean past, Calvinism is built upon the teaching of ancient Manichaeism. Calvinism leans upon Manichaean interpretations of key scriptures. Calvinism lacks a solid historical and biblical foundation within early Christianity. It rests upon unstable sand of ancient heretical and pagan doctrines. For these reasons, the tiny foundation upholding the impressively logical structure of Augustinian Calvinism should be pronounced unstable and condemned as unsafe. Oh, but that's not for scholars. So are you telling me he can't express himself with clarity? Well, then maybe you could explain the statements made here. I think it's the red one. Let me see.
Say that Augustine was the first to clearly articulate these views. That coupled with what you have found, it seems to be an insurmountable argument against a more deterministic understanding of the text.
Yes, if you want to remain a traditional Christian. If you want to go be a Manichaean Christian with Augustine, then it's fine to take a deterministic view. But for a traditional Christian, you should hold a free will view.
Were you lying? Is that consistent with what I just read? That was said before these words were written. These words were written as a summary of what's in here. So are you telling me? Which one's the lie? Which one's the lie? Or is there a consistency all the way through? There's a consistency all the way through. Yeah. So, overstate Wilson's generalized summaries to draw absurd conclusions clearly not meant by Wilson. I just read it. That's what you're promoting. I think I need to take that section, transcribe it, and post it, and just say, just read it again. There's the quote. Let's just one more time. And remember, what's interesting here, and this is vitally important. Think about this. What does Leighton ask here? Did you catch it? Leighton doesn't ask about interpretation of early church fathers. Did you catch the shift? Let's listen to it again at regular speed.
Say that Augustine was the first to clearly articulate these views. That coupled with what you found, it seems to be an insurmountable argument against a more deterministic understanding of the text.
A more deterministic understanding of the text. The text of what? The text of Augustine, Ambrose, Ambrosiaster, Tertullian, Justin Martyr. No. Of the Bible. Of the Bible. Do these non-Roman Catholics realize they're arguing as Roman Catholics? That it's the teaching of the church that determines the lens through which you read this text of Scripture? Do they not realize? I think they should. They should realize they reject the Reformation. They reject the Reformation. They're popeless Catholics. Because at the very point that Luther identified as the hinge upon which it all turns, they are saying Luther and Calvin were Manichaean. They were Manichaeans. That's their argument. They are on Rome's side, and now they're on Rome's side epistemologically, saying that the interpretation of the early writers needs to be the lens, an insurmountable lens in the interpretation of the text of Scripture itself. That's what you just heard. Which then resulted in...
Yes, if you want to remain a traditional Christian. If you want to go be a Manichaean Christian with Augustine, then it's fine to take a deterministic view. But for a traditional Christian, you should hold a free will view.
I didn't make this up. This is exactly what they're saying. I'm not overemphasizing anything. I'm letting them speak for themselves. For example, pretend Dr. Wilson is attempting to argue that Calvin and all Calvinists completely ignore the Bible and get all their theological views only from Augustine and the Manichaeans. Straw man. What did you just say? What did he just say right here? What did you just ask him? Is this not an insurmountable argument that you cannot interpret the Bible this way? Well, yeah, if you want to be a Manichaean Christian. That's what he just said. I mean, the thesis here is that the interpretations that we give, remember he said, oh yeah, on the back, I've got a whole thing about the verses that were used by the Manichaeans and how they were used by Augustine. Whole appendix does. So, without the demonstration, not only of what Manichaean exegesis would even look like. What is a Manichaean hermeneutic? And the demonstration that not only is that identical to what Augustine does, but then it becomes identical with what Calvin does, and then it becomes identical with what Turretin does, then your thesis is not substantiated. Reference an unknown Lutheran. No, he's not unknown. You've actually been having conversations with him, who supposedly provided over 150 pages of apparent contradictions about Augustine's view on baptism as it relates to the early church fathers, which has little to do with White's actual point of contention with Wilson regarding the introduction of deterministic philosophy within the early church writings. Red herring. It's central to his own argument. It's central to his own argument. He's the one that brought it up. He's the one that said this is what started the argument with Pelagius. Leighton, have you even read it? Leighton, you have this? Yes or no? Because you're complaining. I only got this a little while ago. I now have the PDF of it. I'll bet you dollars to donuts I've read more of this than Leighton Flowers has. Let alone this. What are you talking about, man? Oh, by the way, like I said, I am encouraging this young man and another fellow he's working with. I think they need to they're talking book. They need to do the book. Because while it's not my primary focus, it's central to the argument. It's central to the argument. There is a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature. And one of the first things I said, how many hours have I been on this? One of the first things I said, if you go read scholarly works on baptism, what you find is, in that area, my experience, you find in the early church what reflects your tradition. Because I've read Ferguson, I've read all sorts of major works on the subject of baptism in the early church. And the Catholics find their views, and the Orthodox find their views, and the Lutherans find their views, and the Baptists actually find their views too. So you can, grab Pelican and things like that and check these things out. But it is a massively broad subject. Something this small couldn't even start to summarize it. Couldn't even start to summarize it. Tell your audience you're not going to provide the material because you want to let the Lutheran provide himself. I didn't make it an argument. I'm just telling you the facts. We'll get into it when we get into the dissertation. Provide quotations with Pelican. There's especially stuff about the idea of faith as a gift. That we will definitely get into, because that's not even a question. He says Augustine's first one to come up with this. Go all the way back to Origen. Not difficult to do. Yeah, we'll get to it. But you're assuming that we're done. We ain't done, son. We ain't done. Question Dr. Wilson's integrity by insisting his motives were not what Dr. Wilson claims they were when beginning his studies, i.e. Wilson said he started the study to find out what the ECFs taught, but is accused of going in with a view and seeking to prove it ad hominem. If I said you are to reject his conclusions because of that, that's fine. I'm saying this is just bad scholarship. It is obvious to me, in light of the utilization of language in the dissertation itself, that instead of having no conclusion and allowing the material to drive that, the conclusion is what's driving the material. That is not an ad hominem. That is my conclusion upon looking at what the argumentation itself is. Question to mock Dr. Wilson's credentials and scholarship by making hyperbolic, audacious, sweeping criticisms without a single refuted citation from his actual Oxford thesis. Not there yet. Give me time. You'll have to back every one of these things. You won't, but you should have to back. Keep promising your audience that you're going to get to the scholarly citations. Tell them there are hundreds of mistakes without actually citing a single one. They include Dr. Wilson won't even want to debate after these refutations finally come to light. Chest thumping. If you want to call it chest thumping, that's fine. You are just simply being premature. You are acting like a person who is desperately afraid. You are afraid that the man you have put forward as the proponent, the scholarly proponent of your particular unique new view, provisionism, didn't get it right. Didn't get it right. You're afraid. And that's how you're acting. Why would you put this out? This is premature. We've said we're going to go through. Can you imagine? Think about what the argumentation here is, folks. It's actually being argued that I should just cut to the chase and not deal with all the background issues, not listen to an interview Leighton Flowers himself did with the author as context, as background material. Man alive, I wish people would be that thorough in responding to most of what I do. The complaint is, you're going too deep. Stop. You're just scared to death, and you've got good reason to be. Given what happened today, you've got good reason to be. Did I miss any? Yeah, well, there you go.